4 random indie devs come together to make a game based on the theme calm versus rage. But there's a twist. Every developer can communicate with each other, but only one can work on the project at a time, passing it from dev to dev. These challenges have created solar system builders, tactical spy adventures, and even physics-based shenanigans. Who knows what will be cooked up next? So let's find out by jumping right into it with dev number 1.
Hey, hi, I'm Possibly Axolotl, and I'm the first developer, which is terrifying. I basically have to set at least the general idea for what this game is to become, which is a little bit of pressure, but I think I can handle it. The theme is calm versus rage, so the first thing I did was jot down a bunch of ideas for what kind of game it could be. One thing that came to mind was the Celeste volcano levels, where you have to press these switches to switch between the cold, icy world and the hot, lava-filled one. It's the same world in both states, but you need to utilize the unique abilities of both of them in order to not die and make it to the end. Based on that, I decided to try and make a sort of top-down stealth game where you need to sneak around and steal the money. The catch is, in order to complete levels, you need to switch between the undetectable, slow, calm state and the hard-to-control enraged state. The first thing I did was, of course, draw a little fella here. I wanted it to look like they had some sort of ski mask on, only it's way too big and covers their entire body. I also drew up some animations for walking, running, and idling, which look pretty neat in my opinion, and a very temporary tile set that I imagine will probably be replaced later. Logically, next I worked on the rage ability. I made a shader that creates a perfect circle for the player shadow. That way, the shadow is always circle. The game's like 8 pixels, I don't know why I did that. But hey, it wasn't for nothing. I was able to use the circle shader to make this rage meter as well. It builds up automatically over time, and once it's full, you can press space to start sprinting in a direction and bouncing off everything. When you're in the enraged state, you can destroy these boxes that would normally be blocking your path. I also created some cameras that don't notice you when you're just walking, but they do when you try to sprint past them and forcibly restart the level. They use this weird teardrop shape as a collider. I just kinda drew it to have something there. I'm sure someone will replace it later. And that's more or less my time. I ended up being kind of busy around this time period, so I didn't get as much done as I could have, but I hope I created an interesting base for people to build off of. Because of that, right now I'd give the game a 5 out of 10. It's not much yet, but it has a lot of room to grow. While you're here, if you want to find me around, you know where. Anyway, on to the next dev. Whee!
Hi, I'm Radnix. I'm making a game about little guys. Alright, I think it'll help if the player could see what to avoid, so I added a visible graphic to represent the sight of the camera. Next, let's give the player a chance to understand how they messed up. I made the player freeze for a moment when they get caught, and I drew this shocked-looking sprite with the signature big sweat mark. And then I added a transition that closes in like this around the player and then opens back up at the start of the level. Now, I'm very interested in this rage mechanic, so I drafted up a level with different puzzle ideas. I think it's good that the rage lasts for a few seconds, but I didn't always like waiting for the timer to run out, so in the next part I added the green peace orb. When you touch it, it instantly calms you down to stop you from barreling into this camera. A bit further on, I added a checkpoint flag so that I didn't have to start the level from the very beginning. And then I figured the next step up would be moving cameras. This adds timing as a factor to the player's decisions, so sure you can break through these boxes, but you better do it without getting murked by these spinning cameras. Then I added these cracked floor tiles that crumble away when you step on them. There's some cool things we could do with that. We could make a one-way path that doesn't let us backtrack, or we could actually use the peace orbs as an obstacle, since they halt your momentum and could send you falling down the pit. And finally, I played around with buttons. I coded these buttons to switch the directions of the cameras, so in this puzzle, the player has to fix the directions before bolting ahead. And that sums up my work on the game. I tried not to box it in at this stage. My goal was to prototype different puzzle and obstacle designs, with the hopes that future devs would find some things they really liked and could hone in on. Thanks to Possibly Axolotl for the clean handoff, and good luck to the next dev. And Wishlist Little Guys on Steam.
Hey, I'm Studio Kunik. I'm pretty new to this whole game dev YouTube thing, but I got invited to this whole project and I figured, what the hey, I'll give it a shot. I've only opened Godot twice. I'm regretting this decision, but let's give it a play. Let's see where we're currently at, and then I'll try to figure out what I want to do from there. All right, So we got some nice built-in instructions, WASD or arrow keys, and space to go into rage. Okay, I think I've got a pretty good idea for where this game is going. So the game, I think, needs a name. I'm gonna try to figure that out. And then it also, I think there's room for an artistic choice and a few other elements. So I've got some ideas in mind for this week, but you're gonna find out about that probably right about now. Chat, I'm not gonna lie, I think I cooked. Nothing in the original game outside of breaking the boxes really felt like you had any kind of impact. So I wanted to rectify that. And it just so happens that juice is my favorite thing to do. So it all worked out. So for day one, I decided to lean into the color scheme. They had this pink, tealish, dark bluish color going on. So I decided to use that for a striped background effect. And I also added a deep sort of faux shadow to the level itself using that deep blue. I tweaked some of the sprites, but I constantly tweak them throughout my development, so I'm not really gonna show those. They're gonna change a few times anyways. I decided to move the tutorial text from off screen down into the main area, kind of like the Binding of Isaac. And that made it so that they were both easier to read over the striped background and kind of just tied into, hey, this is where you're able to walk here. I also wasn't a fan of the design for the rage meter, so I decided to take inspiration from Balatro and make it catch on fire when you're able to rage. Then some final changes for day one. I added some smoke trail when you're raging, and I added a very subtle screen rocking effect that I like to use in my retro games. And that's what I did for day one. Or that's what I'd like to say I did for day one, if it weren't for the fact that I got bored 6 hours later and came back to it. So I tweaked the sprites yet again. I added a screen bounce effect, so when you bounce off walls, the screen will shake a little bit, and I added contextual messages that pop up depending on what you do. Whether you bounce off a wall, hit a box, or hit a flag, or whatever, there's going to be a contextual message for it. I also decided to change the rage mechanic to require 4 space button presses to activate. The idea was to both lean into the fact that it's kind of rage-inducing to constantly mash a space button to go into rage mode, but also to give the next developer potentially something to hook onto. And then for day two, I mostly did bug fixes, but I noticed that Radnix, the previous developer, had added a completely separate stage, but there was no way to get to that stage. So I added a final flag to the end of the level to let you swap stages. And a quick note on the game, it kind of felt like a 3-hour game jam game I did a few years ago where you were trying to rob a bank and avoid being seen by police. So I decided to sort of lean into that here and make the final goal of every stage be a hovering bag of money. Then I decided to tweak some of the stage mechanics to flow a little bit better. I added on-screen credits, and finally, I named the game Edge of Control. It fits the rage idea and overall feel of the mechanics. Oh, I also forgot that I did all the sound effects, and I found a really cool music pack on Itch.io that really fit the tone of the game. And what's cool is that the music allowed me to dynamically transition between one track and another, depending on whether or not you were in rage mode. And that's my pass. At the time, I thought there was 5 total developers, not 4, and I was afraid I had done way too much of the fun stuff, because again, I prefer doing this kind of stuff, not necessarily the creation of the game, but the juice and the aesthetic of it. So I decided to yield the rest of my time to the next and final developer, giving them, instead of 5 days, somewhere closer to the 8 or 9 day range. And with that, I'll pass it on over to them.
Hey, I'm Landon. I'm making a game called House in Hand, which is a Merge 3 deck building roguelike where you build little cities on little islands. It's kinda like Balatro meets Candy Crush. You can wishlist the game now on Steam, and if you want to follow the progress, you can check out my YouTube channel, Landon Develops. Anyways, let's jump into the collab project. My first impression when opening the project was that it was super polished. I really loved all the little text effects, the CRT filtered thing, and how the whole level is kinda swaying. I was actually really happy there was a ton of polish because I suck at polishing and I probably would have done a bad job. I was the final dev in the challenge, so it was my job to finish off the game. There were 2 or so levels when I got the project. One introduced the concept of the cameras and the other was kind of more puzzly. Felt like there were some solid mechanics, but we needed some actual levels to use those mechanics. So that's what I decided I would do to finish off the project. The idea that when you're in normal mode, you can control your character precisely, but when you're in rage mode, you're fast but less precise, made me think of that old Flash game, The World's Hardest Game. I thought it'd be fun to play with the idea of precision top-down gameplay where there's the possibility that you could just get sent into a rage and mess everything up. Side note, is there a word for precision platforming but it's top-down? I think I'll probably just call it precision top-downing from now on, even though that sounds kind of stupid. Anyway, first thing I did was to actually add this little helper text to try and tell the player that the cameras would only kill you in rage mode. I also tried to get this message across in the level design, since you basically have to walk past the first camera. Then as you progress through the level, you might hit a camera in rage mode and lose, cementing the kind of idea in your head. The first level was pretty much already built, I just moved some stuff around. The second level I didn't touch at all. I think this sort of puzzle mechanic is pretty cool, so I just left it as is. At this point, the game really needed something to induce rage in the player to add tension to the precision top-downing, so I added the aptly named Rage Inducer, which is this little red ball that if you touch it, you instantly go into rage mode. I also made it so that it could move along a path, and then I added spikes, because who doesn't love spikes? I was having a ton of fun just adding random mechanics to the game and then messing with them in levels. This is not my usual style of game, and I'm usually so bogged down in systems and stuff that I rarely get the chance to just mess around while making games, so this was super fun for me. Next, I added moving cameras. I already had a rotating camera, but I added cameras that could move along a path, and then I added this level that I think is pretty clever. I'm not going to show the full thing here because you should just go play the game and see for yourself, but it involves a long hallway and a camera chasing you. Finally, I created one last level that had all the mechanics I'd created previously in one long ultimate precision top-downing challenge. I showed the game to my girlfriend thinking she'd be impressed, but she said that I made the game too hard. I won't lie, this last level, I was able to beat it when I was making the game, but now that I'm trying it again, it is really hard. So, sorry. It's really the Dark Souls of precision top-downing games, I guess. Anyway, I actually think this game is super fun. I think with a bit more content, it would be a great game. So I give it a solid 7.5 out of 10.
To get a true first impression of the game, make sure to play it yourself by clicking on the link in the description and leave a comment as to what you think of the game and what you would have done different. Or click on the title card on screen now to watch yet another amazing game come to life at the hands of your favorite indie devs. And thank you for watching.